Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another one of our updates from Washington. First thing I want to talk about is the first 100 days of the Trump administration. And if your heads are reeling a little bit in terms of, in a sense, the alternative realities that are taking place, literally playing out on your screens, this was on full display yesterday. In the Trump world display, there was a cabinet meeting that was broadcast that bizarre would be an understatement. It was a cabinet meeting that would have been more appropriate coming out of North Korea than out of Washington, D.C. Yesterday at the Trump cabinet meeting, literally every cabinet member went around and had to pay accolades to the great leader and say how wonderful Donald Trump has been and will be. Well, that's one world, but in the real world, where Americans and Virginians live, the results are absolutely counter. There's never been an American president that, at least in the last 50 plus years, that has lost more popularity quicker than Donald Trump. We saw yesterday the economy, for the first time in, I believe, 4 years, literally shrunk in size. Awful economic news, and was obviously the markets yesterday reflected that in their downward trend. Matter of fact, the stock market for the first quarter has performed the worst since 1974. And that's before we see the full effects of this completely misguided tariff policy, where I hear from Virginia small businesses in particular how their businesses will be disrupted, how they don't know if you're in housing, where the lumber costs are going to be, if you are importing. I've talked in the past about a local beer manufacturer who gets some of their Pilsner from and barley from Canada. They get their beer caps, I believe, from Mexico. They get their kegs from Germany. Across the board, costs are going up. And remember, these tariffs are taxes on American families. And in a rare moment of truthfulness yesterday, Donald Trump said, well, maybe Americans won't be able to buy toys for Christmas and only have 2 dolls, and they may cost a few dollars more. It may have been the first honest comment by Donald Trump about what his policies are doing to the economy. Remember, the vast majority of Americans who voted for Mr. Trump did so because they thought he was going to bring prices down. The opposite has taken place. Prices have gone up. He has literally burnt bridges with friends and allies around the world. And he has a tariff policy that in many cases hurts our friends. And strangely enough, the one country that didn't get tariffed at all was Russia. This strange relationship between Trump and Putin, frankly, defies any kind of policy that any American president has had since the end of the Second World War. That's just on the domestic front. As I was walking in, I received news that a couple of reports have confirmed, and we'll see, that the National Security Advisor and his top deputy, Mike Waltz, are being either fired or resigning. This is something I've called for since the egregious misuse of classified information on the Signal chat that were information about American military efforts in the Middle East were put on this unsecured commercial channel that, frankly, if it had gotten out and been captured by our adversaries, we very well probably would have lost flyers. And again, I would remind Virginians that the aircraft carrier these planes launched from was the Truman, that's home ported in Norfolk. And I can tell you, having had a town hall down in both Virginia Beach and Chesapeake recently, the families and friends of these sailors are angry beyond belief. They know how devastating this information could be if it gotten out. Now, it's appropriate that Waltz is leaving, but what we really need to see is Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, resign as well. This is a guy who's so incompetent and so unprepared for this job that literally he has the whole Pentagon in chaos, and I believe is undermining the faith in that institution and undermining the morale of our troops all across the world. And I remind folks as well, this is a Secretary of Defense that strangely enough has his wife, his brother, and his lawyer all on DOD payroll. How this is not kind of nepotism beyond belief is we still haven't had an explanation. Hegseth needs to go. I believe as well the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, needs to go as well. She repeatedly attacks and undermines the credibility of the intelligence community workforce, usually on right-wing media, and almost on a regular basis. I've never seen a Director of National Intelligence appear on media as many times as she has literally in the first 100 days. And again, these comments not only in many places are unfounded, but they are undermining the credibility and the morale of the intelligence workforce. As the former chair and now vice chair of the Intelligence Committee, there's not a day that goes by that I don't hear from the men and women who help defend our nation as members of the intelligence community that aren't feeling that they are under attack, that their credibility and work product is being questioned on a regular basis. And we're seeing our country become, frankly, less safe because of this. Literally, there are publications from both Britain and Germany that are trying to hire away scientists and engineers who work in our intelligence community. And we've seen evidence as well of efforts by the Chinese government to potentially recruit some of these disaffected members of our IC. And I point out, as I have in the past, it literally cost, at best estimate, about $330,000 to get a security clearance and train a CIA officer. The fact that without regard to merit, many of these new CIA officers who are called probationary for the first 2 years are being fired without cause. And that kind of chill means that who's going to be willing to take up the cause of serving our country in the intelligence community, or for that matter, in our armed forces, when you see the kind of incompetence at the Pentagon that's taking place. If we really want to make America safer, we need a defense secretary and a director of national intelligence that can actually earn the respect of the men and women who serve to protect our country. So Waltz has gone. If these press reports are correct, Hegseth should go and should have been fired or resigned earlier. Remember, he not only took classified information, battle plans, and shared them literally with family members and others on his personal cell phone. We still don't know whether that personal cell phone has been checked to see if malware has been put on, because this administration is unwilling to meet any of the traditional security protocols that every prior administration, including the first Trump administration, met. So I think the American public is seeing what's happening. The fact that in the polling yesterday, literally half of Americans gave Trump a failing grade already. Again, no president has seen their popularity slide as quickly as Mr. Trump. On a more positive note, and it's sometimes hard these days to find more positive notes, but yesterday I introduced bipartisan legislation along with Senator Cantwell and of Washington State and Senator Young of Indiana that would greatly expand the low-income tax credits that are available for housing construction. This program, about 90% of the affordable housing units that have been built in America have used the low income housing tax credit as a tool. It's created about 4 million additional housing units. We still have a housing shortage, and particularly affordable housing shortage across the whole nation. If our legislation is passed, it would increase the number of these credits by about 50%. That would be a remarkable spurt to growth in the housing sector. We need more housing across every community in Virginia, rural, suburban, urban. I've got other initiatives that would incent housing being built close to where workers work and literally allow businesses to pay down and contribute to the down payment cost for housing that's close to where people work. But this housing crisis is extraordinary, and it's frankly, it and childcare are the two issues that I hear the most around the Commonwealth. We expect to get to a housing major legislation in the coming months. I've got a series of ideas that I'm going to be implementing and hopefully get into this legislation. But this low-income housing tax credit is a proven program, and expanding it by 50% will be a dramatic incentive for more houses to be built. Of course, I have to, again, caveat that a bit with the fact that with the level of these tariffs, when we think about, for example, lumber costs and the fact that we import a lot of the lumber from Canada, the actual costs are going to continue to go up based upon Mr. Trump's literally, I think, ridiculous tariff policies. So more to come on that. Matter of fact, there's also been reports, and we're trying to investigate this, that some of the countries who have been trying to seek tariff relief have been directed, as they come to Washington, to go visit Elon Musk and his Doge efforts. Why you would have to go see Mr. Musk, the world's wealthiest man, to see if you can get tariff relief. What does his Doge effort have to do with tariffs? Well, it appears there have been reports that these countries are basically being almost extorted to be required to sign up for Mr. Musk's satellite services if they want to get any kind of tariff relief. And that some of these activities are literally taking place from Mr. Musk's office in the White House. We need to run this to ground, but if this is true, will this finally be the kind of gross corruption in plain sight that you might expect from some third world country, but you would not come to expect from the United States of America? So I'm hopeful on the housing front, but the chaos and in some places just plain cruelty that is coming out of this administration is breathtaking in its scope. And again, spent a week in Southwest Virginia during the break, and that part of the Commonwealth supported Mr. Trump at record levels. And I heard from virtually every community huge concerns about some of these Trump policies. So with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to Lauren and be happy to take your questions.
Senator, our first question is Nicholas Benton with Falls Church News Press. Nick? Okay, we'll move on to Sarah Allen with CBS 19.
Hi, Senator Warner. Thanks for doing this today. Obviously, we saw the vote that could bring authority of tariffs back to Congress narrowly failed. Do you think there will be a revised version of some kind that would come back for a vote, and what are the next steps for that?
I'm sorry, Sarah. Did you say about the tariff restriction that the vote of yesterday?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Listen, this was. There clearly were 51 votes, as we saw, and I give a lot of credit to my dear friend Tim Kaine for being the leader on this. The only way Trump has been able to put these tariffs in place in the first place, because it is literally Congress's responsibility in the Constitution to do trade policy and to impose tariffs. Trump has declared these national emergencies, and And in the case, for example, of Canada, the Senate agreed by majority vote that there was not that kind of emergency with Canada. I think the same will play out on the overall emergencies that are being used to declare these tariffs, particularly on our allies around the world. It was unfortunate that 2 senators were not present yesterday. I don't believe they've changed their views. So when they return, we're going to try to find a way to bring this back up on the floor of the Senate. And this is one of the areas I can tell you, I probably spoke to a half a dozen Senate Republicans yesterday who voted against the resolution, but were hoping it would pass. Time and again from my Republican colleagues, whether it's tariffs, whether it's this gross mishandling of classified information or the firing of the NSA general, where my Republican friends, particularly those who serve on the Intelligence Committee, have said, gosh, this is awful what Trump is doing and what this administration is doing. And they privately commend me virtually every day to say, Mark, keep making this case. Well, I hope and pray for the sake of our country that they will stop giving me private reassurances or private assurances to Tim that he's doing the right thing, and find their voice, find their courage. If they really believe these things, don't tell me privately. Stand up on the floor of the Senate and vote your conscience. I believe that will come as the president's numbers continue to decline, but it's been pretty disheartening for this first 100 days that many of them have been fearful because not only the retribution that Trump tries to extract on anyone that goes against him, but also, candidly, the ability of Elon Musk with his 200 million followers to literally threaten people. I've had a couple of Republican senators who've had to hire personal security for their families because they have been attacked by Elon Musk on his Twitter account. That leads to crazies to take action, threatening families. And again, this is not a hypothetical. Think about what happened just a couple of weeks ago during the first night of Passover when an individual in Pennsylvania firebombed the Pennsylvania governor's mansion. And I believe these actions are incented by oftentimes some of the commentary that takes place on social media, and a lot of this generated by Elon Musk.
Senator, our next question is Rachel Branning with WSUT.
Hi, Senator. Thanks so much for taking our questions today. Obviously, you have been very outspoken against these global tariffs. Is there another way to help out U.S. businesses and consumers to maybe losing money from tariffs from other countries like China, other than retaliatory tariffs?
You know, here's the thing that is, let me answer that in 2 ways. First, from a global perspective, and I see this in my dealings with foreign governments on a regular basis. I see this in terms of the intelligence reports. China feels they have the upper hand at this point. China believes that they can withstand the pain of tariffs longer than America. And by the virtue of what Trump has done by putting these tariffs on so many of our allies, I think particularly about, for example, Vietnam, where we for years encouraged people to move their manufacturing out of China and to move to countries like Vietnam, and now Vietnam's been hit by a 46% tariff. So what Trump's actions are doing are literally pushing countries that had moved away from China to go ahead and actually do more trade with China because they believe that China is a more stable and reliable partner than the United States of America. Just let that sink in for a moment, that China is a more reliable partner and a more stable partner than the United States of America. And some of this damage, can't be undone, even if we see, as I expect we will, reversals by Trump as he realizes that these tariffs are cutting into America's purchasing power and going to raise prices. And again, I think candidly, the callousness that Trump acknowledged yesterday that maybe folks wouldn't be able to buy as many toys for their kids for Christmas and they might cost more. Again, maybe one of the most honest comments that Trump has made about this policy. Getting them rolled back, having them stop, would actually help bring down costs. But some of the damage, even if these policies are reversed, we're still going to bear the burden. I can assure you, I've had conversations with the new Prime Minister of Canada. His view about America has changed dramatically. And I think, who could imagine Canada as an enemy? But it'll be a long, long time before our neighbors to the north, the Canadians, will buy American products the way they used to. So some of this damage can't be reversed. What can be reversed is if Trump were to be willing to acknowledge that his policy has failed, that it has hurt American businesses, and ultimately is a tax on Americans on all of their goods, because so many of our goods are connected through a supply chain. And the idea, I know Trump makes the case, well, this is going to bring back manufacturing to America. I don't know of any business that is making decisions that would bring manufacturing back because of the erratic and unpredictable and chaotic nature of Trump's policies. And having no transition period makes this even more difficult. So there's a reason that basically half of the Americans gave Trump an F, a total failing grade for his first 3 months in office. And literally the fact that no president has seen his popularity decline this quickly. The verdict is in. The data is out there. It's been a huge mistake. I hope that he will reverse these tariffs. But again, some of this damage, even with the reversal of these tariffs, we will still feel it in our pocketbooks. We will still feel it in the decline in folks' retirement accounts, their 401k accounts. Some of this damage, particularly in terms of trust that we've earned from 70 years of working with nations around the world, some of that can't be restored because we're just not viewed as a reliable partner anymore.
Hi, Senator Warner. Thanks for doing this. We're trying to figure out, it's hard to kind of get a definitive number on how many Northern Virginia residents and Virginians generally have lost federal jobs. I was wondering if y'all have a sense of that, and are you all working on anything to help the federal workers who've lost their jobs?
Well, I know a number of local governments have tried to put out job fairs and other areas, but again, these federal workers in many areas, if you are a air traffic controller or an FAA expert, there's not a lot of similar jobs in local government or state government. We had someone come in that I met a couple weeks ago that we did a story about yesterday that worked at the FDA in a program that tries to cease childhood smoking. Now, that program receives no federal funds. It is funded entirely by industry fees. That program has proven to save in healthcare costs about $38 billion. And virtually the whole department was fired without cause, without reason. Doesn't save the federal government a dime, yet this individual now has to go out and try to afford child care so she can look for a new job. It's cruel. It doesn't save money. And we are getting more data out already that so far, even if you look at Musk's claims that about $150 billion in savings, now a lot of that data has been rebutted, but it's already been documented as well that his actions have cost the American taxpayers about $135 billion in shutting down programs and then having to rehire people, in terms of the kind of chaos and disruption of services. And it's so unfortunate. A smart DOGE, because there is inefficiency in government. And the one thing I'll give Trump credit for is that he was willing to kind of break things, but having ability to put dramatic change in place with a smart DOGE could have saved money. But instead, I think about that image of Elon Musk bringing a chainsaw. Well, this chainsaw approach to cuts, and Trump and Musk's complete lack of empathy towards our federal workers has really been a disaster. And I fear some of the repercussions. I'll give you one example. Virginia Tech was seeing a dramatic decline in the number of students that would accept their offer to go to Virginia Tech. They dug into the data, and it looked like about 85% of the families that you would have otherwise expected to accept the Virginia Tech offer were rethinking that because one of the parents were either a federal worker or a government contractor. When you are so in such economic duress that you're not willing or not able to send your kid to college, that shows the kind of effect, particularly that we're seeing in Northern Virginia. And let me just say, this is just the tip of the spear. If some of the cuts continue as stupidly as they've been laid out, we're going to see these same kind of effects across Virginia and across our nation. I'd remind folks that while Northern Virginia has the greatest concentration of federal workers, I think I've seen numbers approaching about 52,000 federal workers or contractors in Hampton Roads. Hampton Roads will feel this effect as well. And unfortunately, this kind of again, using the very words of the director of OMB, where he wants to traumatize the federal workforce. He's been successful at that. What we're going to see happening is not only the immediate economic hit, but who's going to join the federal government going forward? All right? I was in Roanoke again a week ago, and a dad was complaining to me about his daughter at 26, a year out of college, working in the defense industry, saying she doesn't know if she's going to have a job tomorrow. Now, she quits and goes and works in the tech community. That may be good for her, but it's sure as heck not good for making sure our nation is safe. So you combine that insecurity combined with the complete incompetence of Pete Hegseth, and you've got an America today that is less safe. We have less allies, and the data is out there. The economy has shrunk at a dramatic rate for the first time in 4 years.
Senator, that was our final question.
Well, again, I'm sorry that this has kind of been a bit of a grim report. I do want to emphasize, the housing efforts that are as bipartisan. We have to do more there. There's a series of other legislation that I'm working on in a bipartisan way, but I'm also spending an awful lot of time trying to convince and urge my Republican friends. There are many Republican senators I know care deeply about national security or concerned in their own states about the effects of these tariffs. They just have to find the courage to speak and vote the way they talk to me and others privately. I believe this will change. I believe things will get better. But boy, oh boy, it has been a rough first quarter for America, not only on the economic front, but literally on the global front as, again, countries around the world reassess us. I go back to that comment I made. When people think that China, authoritarian regime, China that steals intellectual property at an incredible rate, China that's investing in technology at a rate greater than we are in many domains, is a safer and more reliable partner to trade with than the United States of America. Let that notion sink in a bit, and it reflects a reversal of literally policies that go back to President Bush, President Obama, President Trump the first term, and President Biden, where we've said, we are the more reliable partner. Be careful when you deal with China. All of those efforts in many ways have been swept aside by the actions of just 1/4 of this new Trump administration. So thanks, everybody.